91% proficiency. How one teacher transformed reading outcomes in just 1 year.
This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Teacher Ezera Washington in Paterson, New Jersey in 2024 helped her students achieve a 91% proficiency on the English language arts portion of the test. This is an amazing 40% increase from the prior year. But if you look at what the National Literacy Institute says, that 70% of low-income fourth graders can't read at a basic level in the U.S., Ezera, how did you do this? What were the methods you employed? And I just want you to take us into your classroom.
I also want to start by saying that you have to build relationships with your kids. I think that's where it genuinely starts. I think when people see or they enter a school that they think might be low performing, they're already like ruling their kids out. So I think that my initial step was, let me get to know my kids. Let me see what they like. Let me see what they don't like. And that's not, oh, what's your favorite color? It's, hey, what's your favorite book? Like, building relationships off of like respect and high expectations. That's where I started. So then in that process, my kids started to tell me how they like to learn. So I think that getting to know them allowed them to feel comfortable to say, hey, I do better if I can listen to an audio first and then we can decode the words. Or, hey, I do better if I can read the book by myself first and then you call on me out loud. So it was like getting to know my kids first and then like keeping that high expectation for sure. That was step one. That was step one for sure.
You are warming my heart. So I always say on the show, you have to relate to educate. The other thing is kids will never do more than you expect them to. Right. So have very high expectations. What does a typical day look like of reading instruction?
So I also am very transparent on where they are. So they start the school year with an assessment, and the assessment tells me their reading level. So a lot of them were like second grade, kindergarten, third grade. And I'm like, oh, all right, this is fifth grade. Let's go. We hit the ground running. So I also think my first step was being transparent. Like, here's your reading level. Here is the goal. And here's some things we're going to get to it. And then also informing the parents. I really feel like our results came from the community, the relationship with parents. Hey, here's where your kid is. This is what I'm doing in the classroom. Here's what you could do at home to help. I think that partnership played a big part in it too. And what we did was whatever skill we were learning that week, I would teach in small groups. So for example, if the skill was main idea, before getting to the fifth grade text, say if you were on a second or third grade, I will pull a second or third grade text from the curriculum and I will teach you main idea from that text first in small group so that next week when we got to main idea, I could push comprehension of the story and not have to teach the skill. So I taught the skill of the week is small group. So all my friends who are reading on second grade level, we're teaching main idea based off of this text, second grade. So that next week when we got to our fifth grade story, you already know the skill main idea. Now I'm going to push universal prompts to get you to understand the content. And I continued that. My next group was third grade. My next group was fourth grade. And then my scholars who were already on grade level, that were already on fifth grade, they got exposed to the text the week of. And then prior to that, they would do probably like more writing. They would do compare and contrast writing, like skills that would be something that they could do.
So we try not to label children. And so there's a balance there. Imagine you're talking to a child who's on a second grade level and they're in fifth grade. Talk to us like you're talking to, let's say that child is, what do you want to call him? Joe.
Okay. So I always start with like, hey, Joe, like, how's your day going? Like, how do you feel about reading? Like, how are you doing in class? Like, tell me, what are things that you feel are going really well? I'll let them tell me what they're doing really well. What are things that I could help you with? And then they'll tell me what they can help you with. All right, let me show you this test. I want to remind you that this test that you're taking only validates how well you did on this test. It doesn't validate how smart you are. So I'm going to show you this results and then I want to talk about it. I want you to tell me how it makes you feel. Based off of this last iReady exam, you scored on a second grade reading level. Talk to me more about that. This is where they'll say, I really struggle with this. I really struggle with that. Some of the questions were like this. Some of the questions were like that. How does that feel to feel that you're on a second grade level, but you're in fifth grade? Some people say like, I really struggle with reading. Reading's not my best. Some kids aren't aware that they're reading that low. So sometimes kids, it motivates them. Sometimes you get kids who shut down. And that's where my relationships save me. From my kid that shuts down, It's all right. I'm here. Like, we're going to work together. Here are things we're going to do. I'm going to assign the audio to you on Monday, and then we're going to read the actual text on Tuesday. When we write, I'm going to make sure that you have an additional 10 minutes to make sure that you know exactly what the prompt is. I'm going to come to you first so that you're clear on the directions. I think that letting them know, them not knowing how to read isn't their fault. Like someone has to teach you how to read. You just don't wake up and learn how to read. So I also give them that reassurance on the skills that you need. I know how to teach. So I'm going to make sure that I go back and do the work so that you can succeed. I had never taught second grade before. So now I'm teaching myself how to blend. I'm teaching myself these diphthongs and all these different blending strategies that I've never done before. But I also explain to my kids, I don't know this. So I'm going to make sure I do the work and we're going to learn together. I'm going to make sure I go home today and I learn these vowel teams and I learn this. And I'm going to be ready for you on Monday. And then they walk in so excited on Monday because they're like, my teacher just spent her weekend learning vowel teams and controlling R's to help me succeed. So I think that partnership with your kids too on letting them know, I got your back. We're going to do this together. You need to do your part because I'm going to do my part. And I think holding each other accountable to, hey, Joe, I did my part. How did you show up for yourself today? And I think it builds like this confidence or this motivation to keep them going, because once they see a small bit of growth, that's all they need. They need growth to show them, okay, this is working, so that they keep going at it.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Now, what happens when you have a student who might be reading in a second grade level and they just give you everything that they've got? And by fall break or winter break, you're like, okay, they're really progressing. Is there a capability to move between groups?
Yes. So I kind of shift my groups based off of classroom observations. So the actual iReady exams we take quarterly. So sometimes I get friends who I'm like, Joe's been working really hard. I think I might be able to move him to like a third grade. So what I do is I'll give him like a quick assessment. It'll be maybe like a quick cold read and a quick comprehension on third grade level. And I'll give it to him independently. And I'm like, hey, Joe, here, work on this. I don't tell him it's third grade, but I'm like, work on this. I'll collect it at the end. And say if it's 5 questions, if he gets 3 out of the 5 correct, I'll be like, okay, he's ready. Let's move on. And then if he doesn't, that tells me he's not ready just yet. Let me keep him here. But I also don't tell them, hey, Joe, this is your chance to move, because I also want him to show me what he could authentically do. Because if I tell him, it's going to change the dynamic. I want to see if you want this on your own, if that makes sense. Like, what self-motivation do you have to prove to me that you can move to this group? Because I don't want you to try your best and then barely make it. And then I move you and then you're struggling to keep up.
Yeah. And it just, I think that setting those expectations is so important. And also having a heart for what it's like to be a struggler. I think we've all had that situation where we felt like we weren't performing on level with the others. And I love how you have the heart and the empathy for where they are. Now, some people listening to you, Ezera, are going to say, I don't have my weekends, and I don't like, it sounds like she's just like pulling, 100 hours a week. Do you feel like you're putting in that much, or is it getting easier now that you've been through this process?
I think that it gets easier if you do the work right the first time. I also feel like I have a different pattern, a different like passion. I have a different passion because I'm born and raised in Paterson. So when I see my kids, I see myself. So the mission for me is a little bit personal. So if that does mean I have to do a additional hour on Friday after work, if that does mean I need to pull a Saturday, that's okay for me because my mission is personal. Like, I remember feeling like getting to college and feeling so unprepared. So that alone drives me enough. I'll give my kids a whole Saturday. So I know certain teachers are going to listen and they're going to be like, I have a family. I can't give a Saturday. You can get as much done as in your workday. And whatever you can't get done that day, you can just roll over to the next day. I feel like for me, because my mission is so personal, for the most part, I do have very strong work-life boundaries. So I try not to take things home. But sometimes it just happens. And for my kids, I'll give them that time if they need it.
Okay. So, Ezera, you've been to lots of reading professional development.
Yes.
And you are a top reading teacher, ELA teacher. what are the things that you hear? And don't call out any specific programs. I'm not looking for that. But I'm just talking about the general things that you're like, hey, I stopped doing that and I'm glad. And here's why.
That's a great question. Can I tell you what I started doing instead of?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, what I stopped doing was giving my kids work and just sitting at my desk thinking that they would get it done. What I stopped doing was saying my kids couldn't do things without teaching them. And what I started doing is saying, instead of saying like, oh, they can't do that, they're not on 5th grade, I've changed my mindset to how do I get them to do this at a level that they can comprehend so that they can master the 5th grade. I never changed the plan. They always have to do 5th grade content. How do I scaffold it so that they could do it? So what I started doing is if I grade an assignment, I'm literally monitoring, like I'm circulating my classroom. I'm actively checking what's on your paper. So, all right, friends, we're working on number 1. You have 5 minutes. I'm walking around my classroom. I'm checking every paper. Good job, friend. Good job. I'm giving in the moment feedback. Good job, friend. Hey, let's look at number 1. Let's reread it. What did you forget? Go back, check it. So what this does for me, this is giving me in the moment data. I got my tracker. I'm putting all my notes on my tracker. So now by the time I get to kid 5 or 6, I already know how my whole class is doing.
Wow.
So it's going to tell me, hey, do I stop right here and do a quick debrief? Or does this tell me that I could keep moving on? So what I stopped doing is waiting for the entire class to be done to go back and reread their papers, to sit down and grade everything. That makes no sense to me. If I accurately circulate while they're working, they're going to tell me in the moment if they get it or if they don't get it. And I also stopped planning a whole week of lesson plans and then feeling like I have to get through it. Because if that week we're working on main idea, if on Monday they show me that they're struggling with key details, there's no reason for me to keep moving on with main ideas. I have to be okay with like adjusting in the moment based off of the data. So, okay, Monday they showed me that key details was a struggle. Tuesday, I'm okay with readjusting so that we could go back and debrief and fix it. I think sometimes we over plan and then we're like, I just got to get through the lesson. But it's like they showed us they didn't understand the lesson. So no matter how well you planned, the lesson's not going to be effective because they showed you on Monday they didn't get it.
And formative assessment is that it changes our instruction. I mean, that's the whole point. We can't say, we want you to plan a year's worth of lessons and we want you to do formative assessment. Those two things don't go together. A year of lessons and good formative assessment cannot coexist.
It can't.
Because you have to tweak and change things while still meeting the standards. That's the artistry of being a remarkable teacher.
I agree.
So let's talk for 1 second about writing, because I know that there's so much emphasis on reading, but they're two sides of the same coin. Reading and writing go together. What do you do differently in writing now?
In writing, I feel like I teach kids the way that I want them to write. And I know that other people have different opinions on it because they're like, no, students should freely write. They should write what their heart desires. But if they don't know what to write, you're going to keep getting nonsense. So I always start with giving a structure. So I'll say, hey, this is how we start paragraphs. We start with a transition word. Now, great, they have the option to choose their own transition word, but I also give a lot of sentence stems. Like you're going to use sentence stems until you prove that you can write a paragraph on your own. And what I've noticed is that students will then start to get their ideas on the paper and then they will move away from the sentence stems. That's a cue to me to show me like, okay, so-and-so really knows what they're talking about because they're not using my sentence stems anymore. Because when you know what you're talking about, you get to the point. But for my friends who might need a little bit more support, those sentence stems allows them to just show me their thinking. So I'm a big sentence stem kind of girl. I do give them, hey, here's what you're going to start with and then build from there.
Do you have a variety of topics that you have students writing on? Do you have a particular writing assignment that your kids just love every time you say we're going to do this?
Yes. So there's like an overall scale. They have like a narrative assignment where they have to write from a different perspective. They don't know that this is a big thing. They just like to be gossipy. Okay. So they're like, so I'm like, pick your favorite scenario that happened this week and write it from somebody else's perspective. So in my brain, I'm looking for them to actually do the skill of narrative point of view. But from their perspective, they just want to see like how juicy they could tell the story. And then once they're finished, I'm like, hey, by the way, did you know that you just did narrative point of view? And they're like, what? That's what you did, what? So I think for that, or it's like, I'll give them a topic and then they have to have a conversation about it. And it's like, based off of what you shared, I want you to rewrite this from someone else's perspective in your group. They don't know that that's a 5th grade writing criteria. So for them, they're like, you want me to write it? I'm like, think about what that person thought. Think about how they might have been feeling inside. Like, think about all their character profile elements, their motivation, their feeling, and rewrite this conversation based from their perspective. Now that's giving me data for when I actually teach it. Do I have to work on dialogue? Do I have to write on feelings? Like, it gives me like points on where I need to start for the next lesson.
I love how you're using your assessments to inform and give you a starting point for your next place. So do you plan at the end of the day for the next day? What does your workflow process look like for your lesson planning?
Yes. So by the end of the day, I already know what needs to be done by the next day. So like during one of my preps, I'll sit and I'll look at my tracker and I'll be like, okay, I had a good 10 minutes to debrief this, but I might think that this might need a reteach. So then I'll look to see, what do I have so far planned for this week? What can I move around? And then in that moment, I'll determine, all right, you need a reteach plan. Let's go back into the drive. Do I already have a reteach plan? Do I need to make a new reteach plan? But by the end of the day, I always know what I'm teaching for the next day. I never walk into a class unprepared, like not knowing what I'm doing for that day.
So ELA teachers around the world are listening to you. Give them their motivational pep talk.
We have the hardest job. I don't care what anyone says. That's our thing. But the point that you feel, I'm going to validate it for you. But I think that teaching your kids how to read, you're giving them the tool that will literally last them for a lifetime. So in those moments where you're feeling overwhelmed, or in those moments where you feel like your work is undeserving, think about that teacher that impacted you. Think about that person who took their time to teach you how to read. Your kids don't know that feeling that teachers feel sometimes, like being defeated. Like, I really wanted to get this one student and I didn't get them. You can get all of them. And you might not get them in the version that you might think, but you just got to keep going. Your impact is seen every single day. And as you move year to year, you're going to know that your friends are reading because of those sacrifices that you did. So I just keep going. And I think it's so cliche to say, but it is. My friends who get it, they're going to get it. They're going to be like, just keep going.
You one foot in front of the other.
Yes. And also leverage your community. Leverage like the veteran teachers that you have in the building, like collaborate. I feel like community is what really drives results. Like leverage the veterans in your building, or, hey, what's really working for you? What are you doing really well? Hey, how did you do this? I liked how you do this. Do you have a minute? Can I come watch you? Like leverage the expertise in your building, because someone in your building already did it right the first time. So leverage that expertise so that you're working smarter, not harder.
So many great ideas here, so much inspiration. You have the results to have the credibility to say the things that needed to be said. This applies to all great teaching, and we do have a tough job. It is not an easy job, but it is so worth it. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and the excitement and joy of what you're doing in your classroom, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. Watch the video version of this podcast and catch my new radio and TV show, Cool Cat Teacher Talk, on YouTube and a radio or TV station near you. Just search Cool Cat Teacher and hit subscribe. For more tips, ideas, and inspiration, join my Cool Cat Teacher Classroom Matters newsletter at coolcatteacher.com/newsletter. Let's connect. I'm at Cool Cat Teacher everywhere on social media, and I'd love to hear from you. Leave a review if you found this helpful. See you later, educator.